Right, so we're talking about the way of peace, and as always, how would you define peace? How would you explain peace to somebody? How would you explain peace to a child?
Peace is be able to put your troubles aside and rest fully in Him, and it'll give you the peace of mind.
Okay, to be able to put your troubles aside and to rest in Him. Good. What else?
Content.
What's that?
Content.
Content. Good. What else? Oh, you're fine. You can have peace in several different areas of life. You can have peace in the way, in the way about a situation. You can have peace in knowing that this is the right thing to do. But we talk about war and peace. What's the difference there? What's that? Quarreling or the lack thereof. Okay, good. So this is kind of what we're talking about as we talk about peace and strife in Proverbs. It's talking about quarreling. It's talking about adversity. And it's talking about the difference of living life in a peaceable manner in order to be a peacemaker, peacekeeper, peace bringer, as opposed to those who stir up strife. How would you understand strife? What's another word that we use every day? What's a normal? I usually don't say strife often. What's another word we use for that? Stress, struggle, conflict. So as always, we're going to jump through topics or through verses sticking to the same topic. And so in chapter 13, verse 10, it says, "By pride comes nothing but strife, but with the well-advised is wisdom." Another translation says, "Arrogance leads to nothing but strife, but wisdom is gained by those who take advice." Why is pride the root of strife?
We're not willing to lean on the Lord. We're willing to trust our own instincts and follow them.
Okay, we're not willing to lean on the Lord. We're willing to trust our own instincts and follow them. Good. What else? Why is pride the root of strife?
We think our way is right, and so does the other person, so it leads to conflict.
Right. You have two people who think that their way is right, and it leads to conflict. It's kind of the idea of when two animals clash heads. They're both full of the understanding that I'm right, the other person's wrong. And so one commentator said the idea of pride here describes contempt for the other's opinion, a clash of competing and unyielding personalities. And I thought that was a good way of putting it. When you're prideful, you're in fact showing contempt for that other person's, for their opinion, for how they think. But a well-advised person is wisdom, or wisdom is gained by those who take advice. Now, why can the prideful person not take advice? Their opinion's better. Now, when you don't take advice, when you think someone's advice is poor, are you usually thinking to yourself, I'm so much better, they're so much more dumb? Is that how you would classify yourself? Or you would just say, that's bad advice. I just know better, right? Often we don't think of ourselves in terms of prideful people. We don't think, well, I'm just so much better and they're so much more dumb. But we often have such a high opinion of ourselves, we fail to see our pride in the midst of our arrogance.
Well, there's some advice Timothy give that is just plain idiotic.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. And how do we know that?
Because it goes against everything that you have been taught, everything that the Bible teaches, everything. There's just so much. And as an arrogant person that's trying to give you this advice.
Okay, right. So our standard is always take it back to the Word of God, right? No matter what kind of advice we get, whether it's from a godly or an ungodly person, we always want to bring it back to the Word of God and compare it to that.
If you tell me, so Don, you can cross that street, you don't even have to look before you cross that street. That's bad advice.
It is bad advice. And you'll realize it too late, right? Chapter 15, verse 18, it says, "A wrathful man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger allies contentions." What's another translation? What does a different translation read?
A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel.
Okay, but a patient man calms a quarrel.
All the days of the afflicted are evil, but the cheerful heart has continual peace.
Okay. Is that 15, verse 18?
I'm so sorry.
I mean, it's a good proverb, but I didn't know if it was.
My eyes are not
It's okay.
working. That file sure looks like an eight. Okay, I think I the same as yours. A hot-tempered man stirs up strife,
Okay.
but he was slow to anger by its contention.
Okay. And so the point here is that quarrels depend more on the person than the subject matter.
The person.
It depends so much more on the individual than the subject matter. Growing up, my friend, he was always argumentative. He was always trying to prove his point. And one time he told me, he was like, "Look, I wouldn't argue if others weren't wrong." And as he got older, he matured in Christ, matured as an individual, and he realized that the contention depended more on him than the subject matter. And that's part of maturity in Christ, realizing that you don't have to express your opinion about every single thing in a way that breaks people apart. It takes great patience, great maturity to be calm in relationships as you have differing views, differing opinions. But a wrathful man, someone who's angry, can't help himself but to stir up strife. That's his knee-jerk reaction. That's what he does. That's who he is, in essence. But a calm person, a patient person, is slow to anger. And the idea is they have a long fuse. That phrase, slow to anger, you see it all throughout the Bible. At least in the New Testament, that Greek word has the idea that they have a long fuse. It takes a long time for their fuse to run out to where they're angry, especially when it's talking about God who is slow to anger. He has a long fuse, breaking it down, burning it down slowly until it gets to the point where it goes off. Chapter 16, verse 7. It says, "When a man's way pleases the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him." What's the idea here? When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him.
He does nothing wrong, there's nothing to fight about.
Okay, he does nothing wrong, there's nothing to fight about. And it's not dependent on him. It's not dependent on his path or his way. It's because he's in the Lord's way. And it's pointing us to the fact that a lifestyle that pleases the Lord really disarms hostility. If you walk in the paths of life, others aren't going to be able to attack you. Others aren't going to have ultimately a problem with you. Now, an unbelieving world has a problem with you when you come in the face of, like, they stand for abortion, and you say, well, I can't stand for abortion because God tells us that we aren't supposed to take a life. Well, at that time, they will be angry with you. So again, it's a principle, okay? So it's not like you can't say it's going to be consistent all across the board, but it's the idea of if you're walking in the ways of the Lord, even your enemies aren't going to have an issue with you. Ultimately, it points back to your character, and we're going to see that this morning in Genesis. But if your character is a high character, think of somebody in your life who you know who has good character, and you would say that person has a great reputation in the community. Now, as a whole, our community, I would say, is not a Christian community. As a whole, not the whole would be Christians, I would say. But if somebody's character or their reputation is known because of their character to be walking in the ways of the Lord, other people like them, other people enjoy them. Chapter 16, verse 28, it says, "A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. What's another translation say for chapter 16, verse 28?
A perverse man stirs up dissension, and a gossip separates close friends.
Okay, a gossip. So it transfers that word whisper, separates the best of friends. Again, it's showing the heart, the character of the person who sows strife, that person who just loves to break people apart. And we would say that person is a gossip. And I would say you guys know people like this. And maybe you've been accused of this, that you're just a gossip and you're just seeking to break people apart. Why does gossip break people apart?
Usually a lie.
Okay, because usually gossip is a lie. Good. I like how it says, in a whisper separates the best of friends. It's the idea of, I have a secret about this individual. I'm really important because I know this secret about that individual. And I'm more important, or the information I have is more important than the character or the heart of that other individual. And I don't care what my words say to break down that person. And so,
It might not be a lie, but it's not anybody else's business.
okay, it might not be a lie, and yeah, great. It doesn't have to be a lie, but it doesn't necessitate that it's somebody else's information. When people trust you with information, it's not yours just to freely share. There was one commentary that said, and this was taken out of context, but he says, we said before that some people will believe anything if it's whispered to them. I like that. And it's true. If somebody comes up to you and they're like, oh, I know this and this about somebody else, you feel special then, because you know it and nobody else knows it, right? And so that's the idea, and that's the heart of somebody who seeks to stir up strife. 17 verse 1 says, better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. Poverty with peace is better than prosperity with strife. And the contrast shows that it's not so much about the food, but it's more about the living circumstances. Does any other translation say that different? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, mine's the same.
Same.
Well, based.
And then moving forward to verse 14 of chapter 17, it says, the beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contentions before a quarrel starts. This is one that my parents often quoted to me growing up. I was foolish, so I didn't take heart to it. And I was like, whatever. And I did my own thing. But what's the idea here? What's the principle? Do you get to choose how much water is let out of the dam when you start that quarrel? You don't, do you? Often that quarrel goes farther, longer than you want it to. Because often when you say something and you snap back, you just want to say your snappy comment and walk away. I won. Is that usually what happens? My brother and I had an argument in college one time, and he said his snappy thing at me, and he turned around to walk out of the room, and I threw my cat at him, and it latched onto his back. It didn't end the quarrel. A lot of water came across that dam, let me tell you. It didn't go well. But that's the idea, that the beginning of strife, the beginning of that conflict, ways.
What had the cat done?
Peanut Gallery, do you have anything to say about there?
There's an old farmer saying, letting the cat out of the bag is a lot easier than putting it back in.
Yeah. Or chucking it at someone's a lot easier than. Yeah.
Just one question, what had your poor cat done to deserve being?
He was fine. He latched right on. He didn't get hurt. He really did. He latched on with all four legs. But the idea is that the conflict has to stop before it even begins. And if the conflict begins, it's like sin. Sin always costs more than we want it to, and that conflict is always going to cost more than we want it to. Chapter 18, verse 7, or verse 6, I'm sorry. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calls for blows. Foolish people get themselves in trouble by what they say. And one commentary said that the beating is probably a physical beating, either by a father or by society. And again, I'll use myself as a personal example. As a kid, I was in a fight with this Turkish kid, and he didn't like me because I was American, and he thought when I spoke English, I was speaking bad about him. And so the fight had kind of ended. He turned to walk away, and I just said something in English just to poke him one last time. And he came back and he grabbed me by the throat and stuck me up against the wall, and then my brother had to save me. Happened often. That was before I threw cats at him. Yeah, I didn't have a cat at that time. But it's so true that our mouths get us in trouble because it's the overflow of our heart. But it's that foolish person that you know that's not going to stop. They're going to keep saying that one last dumb thing, and they will end up getting beat for it. Jumping down to verse 19, a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and the contentions are like the bars of a castle. Now, this is hard to translate in English, so other translations might have a clear representation of this.
An offended brother is more unyielding than a forfeited city, and disputes are like the barred gate of a citadel?
Of a citadel? Yeah. So it's the idea that offended brother, once you offend somebody, it's really hard to get back into a right relationship with them because you've hurt them. Their guard is up. They don't want to deal with you anymore. They're done with you. And so the idea is live life without entering into those hard quarrels where you break those relationships. And again, it talks about a brother. So it talks about somebody who was close to you at one time. And often, those who are closest to you can hurt you the most. Those who are closest to you can make a comment that a stranger, if they made to you, you'd be like, who cares? I don't know you. But if somebody who's close to you, who loves you, who you love them, they make a comment, you know this. It happens. They make a comment, and your walls go up. And you say, I'm done. I'm done with that person. I'm never going to talk to them again. That's how they are. And so that's the idea that stirring up this strife has a lasting impact, has a debilitating impact between those who are close. Chapter 20, verse 3, it says, it is honorable for a man to stop striving, since any fool can start a quarrel. Honor belongs to those who end disputes, but a fool just keeps on arguing. It's honorable to stop talking. Now, this is contrary to the world and the world system, isn't it? If you just say, I'm done talking, well, you've lost and the other person won. If you say, I'm not going to argue with you, they would assume, well, you just don't have anything worth arguing for. Your point was already lost, and so this is a cop-out. But often the Bible is, well, always, the Bible is in opposition to the world and the world's standards. We see this in the life of Christ. When Christ was taken into trial, he didn't yell out trying to clear his name. He didn't start arguing with those who were bringing accusations, but he remained quiet. And it takes an honorable person who remains quiet even when there's accusations that are being hurled at them that are most likely not true. One commentary said one cannot avoid strife entirely, but should avoid unnecessary confrontation. And so don't think that you're supposed to just, that if you do enter into some sort of controversy that you're automatically sinning. Sometimes it can't be helped, but the only thing that can be helped is yourself. Can't think of the verse offhand, the reference, but the New Testament tells us to be at peace with one another, live at peace with one another as to the best of our abilities. Some people won't allow that, but the idea is you're responsible for you, they're responsible for them, and you can't make them act a certain way, but you can affect your own behavior.
Every family needs a dime.
Every family needs a Don.
Well, because I have a mouth that does not quit. And, well, just like the other day when we were, so we were all having a conversation. If he was afraid I was gonna say something that I shouldn't, I can look on the corner of my eye and stand in line.
Yeah, right. And that is that can be your role if you're not in that to help those who are in the midst of that conversation. Yeah.
Well, I was in it to help, but he didn't think I was.
No. I mean, if you're in the conversation, if he's outside of, then he can. Yeah. You're a good guy, Don.
None of that goes in his head.
Yeah, no, you still got to fit through the doors later, so don't let your head get too big. Chapter 22, verse 10, it says, "Cast out the scoffer, and the contention will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease." So the idea is you get rid of that contentious person, there is calm, there is peace. And it's an embarrassing moment when you realize that you're the one who's causing all the drama, you're the one who's causing all the issues, and when you leave, there is peace. And it's a sobering moment when you realize that you're the one in the wrong. Chapter 25, 8 through verse 10, it says, "Do not go hastily to court, for what will you do in the end when your neighbor has put you to shame?" And so the idea is be careful into divulging information publicly. And so if you take your friend or your neighbor to court, most likely more of your private life is going to be exposed than you want. And so verse 9, it says, "Debate your case with your neighbor and do not disclose the secret to another, lest he who hears it expose your shame and your reputation be ruined." 26 verse 17, it says, "He who passes by and meddles in a quarrel is not his own, is like the one who takes a dog by the ears." So one who just gets involved in everybody's business is not really a smart person, and their end is not going to be great. Now, when you think of a dog, if you have a dog, you can take your dog by the ears. That dog doesn't care. And back when this is written, there weren't domesticated dogs. They were basically like hyenas, wild dogs. So if you take a wild dog by the ear, what's going to happen? You're going to get bit, right? And so that's the idea. You get involved in other people's business where you don't belong, you're going to get bit. You're not welcome there. You're not needing to meddle in their quarrel. So you deal with your own business. Don't go around trying to fix other people's business that doesn't belong to you. Verse 26, or chapter 26, verse 21, "As charcoal is to the burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife." Any other translations for that one?
As charcoal to inverse as a wood to fire, so it quarrels, some person for kindling strength, kindling strength,
Strife. Okay, so a quarrelsome or a contentious man kindles strife. So again, this points back to that's the character of coal. That's what coal does. That's what wood does around fire. What does it do? It ignites. It can't help itself. And so just as a contentious person or a quarrelsome person, they kindle strife because it's just who they are. That's their character. And it's so much easier for you to look at somebody else and say, that's them. And you might have somebody in mind. What's embarrassing is someone else might have you in mind. So it's so much easier to see that, oh, that's what this person is like. And it's so much harder to see when we're that kind of a person. And so I think that is, again, why God calls us to live in unity with one another, live in a society, in a church, I would say in a church setting where we can lovingly talk with one another and lovingly call each other out, lovingly share, and then lovingly be called out ourselves because we're blind to our own shortcomings. 28 verse 25, it says, he who is of a proud heart stirs up strife. Again, coming back to the heart, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper. So the first one is somebody who's selfish, who's focused on themselves, as opposed to the one who trusts in the Lord or walks in the ways of the Lord, that person will prosper because they have not their own end in mind, but they have, I want to please the Lord in everything I do. They don't have an agenda. They're not trying to prove their own thoughts or their own stances on things, but they're living for the Lord. Chapter 29, verse 9, it says, if a man contends with a foolish man, whether the fool rages or laughs, there is no peace. What's the point here?
I would say you can't maybe get ahead. You aren't going to win.
Okay, yeah, you're not going to win with a fool, right? How do you apply that to life, though?
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Does this mean that we walk around and we put a little label on top of people and say, they're a fool, I'm never going to interact with them?
No.
Is that the point? We would say no. But what is the point? What's that? Okay, we're no better than half of the ones that we would judge. True, absolutely. I do think it is important to know someone's character, to know what they tend to be like. And I'm not saying label them and say that's who they are for the rest of their life. But we can know exteriorly people, their character, how they act around others. And so I think it's the idea of know when to stop for yourself. It's not saying ignore that person or stay away from that person, but it's saying maybe don't get into a conversation with a fool or somebody who's prone to arguing just for the sake of arguing because they're not in it to learn. And so if you know that person is never in it to learn, and I would categorize my friend when I was younger. That was him. He just wanted to argue. He didn't care your stance. You never convinced him because he was always right. Everybody knew that. And so if we just wanted to argue, we'd go and argue with him just because it was fun sometimes. But that's the point. It's not saying ignore them, don't be their friend, but it's saying know that if you're seeking to change this person's character, are you going to? No. Know their character. Know that you're not the one who's called to change them. Know that if you enter into strife with them, neither one, and the point is neither one wins here. There will be no peace. 28 verse 20, chapter 29 verse 22, it says, an angry man stirs up strife, and a furious man abounds in transgressions. So an angry person stirs up conflict, a hot-headed person increases in rebellion is another translation. But the point is, somebody who's angry, somebody who's a hothead, that's going to be their end. That's going to be what they reap because of what they sowed, because of their anger. So I still have a few minutes here. I want to go into the way of the humble, or the way of humility. So how would you categorize, so we talked about strife, those who cause strife. How would you categorize the humble, those who have humility? And don't raise your hand and say myself because you've fallen. How would you categorize humility? How would you explain it to a child?
We make fun of somebody.
What's that?
We make fun of somebody.
Okay, when you humiliate them, yes. I think this first part, humility, though, carries a different connotation.
I think it's, if you have the knowledge to stop.
Okay?
You see that
Yeah.
you have humility. If you see that this person is just an argumentative person, it takes humility to walk away from that person.
Okay. So it takes humility to walk away from them. Good. What else? How would you explain humility to a child?
Admit that you're wrong.
Admit that you're wrong. One more.
I've heard it said not thinking highly of yourself, or not thinking too low of yourself, but not thinking of yourself at all.
Right. So the idea is you're not in the equation. You're not thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about, I'm so good at walking away. The point is, the whole idea is you're not focused on yourself, but you're focused on the Lord. You're focused on that other individual. They're more important than you, is the idea. That's humility. So, humility compared to pride. Pride is thinking highly of yourself. Humility, I would say, is not thinking of yourself at all. Why would we say not thinking lowly of yourself?
And you're feeling sorry for yourself?
Because then you're having self-pity for yourself. You're feeling sorry for yourself. And those who say, oh, I'm not a great person, they're down here. They're in the pride category because they say, I'm so good, I don't even think highly of myself. Well, you're thinking highly of yourself when you say, I'm not like that person, I think lowly of myself. So even someone who is insecure, someone who's insecure, who are they focusing on? Themselves, right? We would say, well, that's not pride. Well, it is a form of pride. Someone who's insecure is thinking about themselves. The idea of true humility is not thinking about yourself, not being concerned about yourself, but being more concerned with the Lord first and then with others, and then you're not even having time to care or concern about yourself is the idea of those who are humble.
Pastor, I've been going through this a lot, the fact that since I've had the surgery on my arm, I'm at a loss of what some of the stuff I can do. I can't do it anymore.
Yep.
And so many times I've said to him, I'm useless. You know, I'm just made helpless. And I said, I don't like it now.
Yep.
So there again, I'm thinking of myself.
Yep.
But when you look around and see what needs to be done,
Right.
you can't do it. Of course you're going to think of it.
Right. Right. And there's plenty of things around us that cause us to come back to ourselves, right? But it's that same idea of you pointing to Don and saying everybody needs someone like Don. Like that's the idea of like when you can't do it and he can, then you just keep appreciating him.
Well, yeah, that's...
Hypothetically. Okay, sorry.
I do appreciate him. He just doesn't do it the way I would do it.
Okay, so were you up here or were you down there, right? So you fell down there, right? But that's how we all are, and that's our natural bent. It's not how I would do it. We'll do marriage counseling later for those couples who are whispering back and forth right now. So chapter 6, verse 17. We'll stop in about 5 minutes. It says, a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. So going back to verse 16, it says, these 6 things the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination to him. And so all of these are the heart of somebody who is prideful. Someone who has a haughty look or a prideful look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to running to evil, a false witness of those who speak, and then those who sow discord among the brethren. It's interesting, in Matthew 5, we have the Beatitudes. And the first one, the first line of the 7-line part is the exact opposite of Matthew 5:5. In Matthew 5, the Beatitude starts, blessed are, do you remember? The meek or the poor in spirit, right? And so if you have a prideful look, well, you're the opposite of the poor in spirit. You're the opposite of the meek. And then this last one, number 7, is those who sow discord, correlates with the number 7th one of blessed are those who are a peacemaker. And here it says those who sow discord. If you're sowing discord, you're the exact opposite of a peacemaker. And so if you compare the Beatitudes would fall obviously under the category of those who are humble, those who don't think of themselves but think of others. Proverbs chapter 6 would fall under those who are prideful, those who have a high thought of themselves. So go down through this list. A lying tongue. How are you being prideful if you're lying?
You're not gonna admit you're lying.
Okay, you're not going to admit you're lying. With a lying tongue, who are you more concerned about? Yourself or others?
So,
Yourself. You want to look important because I know this juicy bit of information, right? What about hands that shed innocent blood? How is that prideful? My life is more important than their life. A heart that devises wicked plans. My plans are better than theirs. I want myself to prosper. I don't want them to prosper. I'm more important. They're less important. Feet that are swift to running to evil. They're thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about the implications of what that evil will bring about, how it will affect other people. The last two are similar. A false witness who speaks lies. Again, he cares more about how he looks in front of other people than about how he's destroying the reputation, destroying the lives of those around him, and one who sows discord. And this is the idea of somebody who just loves to see people broken apart. And somebody who sows discord among the brethren or among other people usually is the one who sweeps in and says, yeah, can you believe that person? They did this, this, and this. And then they flip-flop to the other side. They're like, yeah, can you believe so-and-so? They did this, this, and this. And so they're playing the middle person, wedging themselves between two other brothers or sisters in Christ, making themselves look better than the other people.